Hey guys, good morning. It is April 28th, 2022, and we're in chapter 26, verse 17 through chapter 26, verse 22. I'm just going to straight read it for a second. So starting in chapter 7, I can't talk today. In chapter 26, verse 17. So Isaac moved away to the Greer Valley, where he set up their tents and settled down. He reopened the wells that his father had dug, which the Philistines had filled in after Abraham's death. Isaac also restored the names that Abraham had given them. Isaac's servants also dug in Greer Valley and discovered a well of fresh water. But then the shepherds from Greer came and claimed the spring. "This is our water," they said, and they argued over it with Isaac's herdsmen. So Isaac named the well Esau, which means argument. Isaac's men then dug another well, but again there was a dispute over it. So Isaac named it Shema, which means hostility. Abandoning that one, Isaac moved on and dug another well. This time there was no dispute over it. So Isaac named the place Roberta, which means open space. For he said, "At last the Lord has created enough space for us to prosper in this land." Do you see it? One well is named argument. One well is named hostility. One well is named open space, or open spaces. The first two wells, argument and hostility. People fought over. People argued about. "No, that's mine. You can't have it. No, that's mine. You can't have it." So Isaac gave it to them. Isaac didn't sit there and put up a giant fight and go, "No, I claim this, you can back off." No, he gave it to them. On the surface, we see this moment in his time, in his real time. And he's going from place to place trying to dig this well, trying to find a place to settle down. But if we look a little deeper at the names of these wells, and the ultimate end of these verses, where Isaac says, "Now the Lord has given us room. Now the Lord has given us a place to settle." Arguments and hostility. We all have them. Our before Jesus is probably filled with them. I know mine is. Whether it's small little tiffs about something tiny, or it's arguments of injustice and pain, whether it's hostility to another person because they took something from you, or it's hostility to another person because they abused you. I've had all of it. I still have some of it. I still have hostility. I still want to prove that I'm enough and that I'm worth somebody looking at and saying I'm right. God doesn't want injustice forgotten. But it's his job. It's his job to take care of that, not ours. We see that here, where the first well is named argument. We get into arguments all the time. We get into conflict all the time. But following Jesus, he teaches us to forgive in those conflicts, to be a peacemaker in those conflicts, and not to keep fighting just simply because of the fact that we want to be right. That is the human condition. We all sit there and we want to be heard. We want to be right. But sometimes, like Isaac, we need to give up the argument. And that's difficult. I know I suffer from it. I know I have to deal with it almost daily sometimes, where I have to be right. But we need to give that up. And that's what God, I believe, that's what God is telling us here, is Isaac gives up the argument. Isaac walks away. Isaac says, fine, you want this? Here, have it. It's not worth me giving up my joy for. It's not worth me fighting over. I can just dig another well. I can just move on. And that's hard. That's real hard. But then you, again, are faced with something else. You're faced with hostility. Because that comes along with the arguments. You get hostile to another person. You sit there and you talk bad about them, or you want to, knock them down a peg, or whatever it is. You feel, you harbor anger. And again, you're in the same situation you were with the argument. Except for this time, it's stewing in your brain, and you're sitting there trying to figure out how to prove you're right. Again, Isaac gives it up. He said, okay, fine. You want this? You can have it. You want hostility? You want to be hostile? Not on me, bro. You can have it. Same thing with the argument. He's like, I'm not going to argue with you. You want to argue? Fine. You go argue. I'm not. And he walks away. He walks away from both argument and hostility. And when he walks away from that, now here's the key. When he walks away from those things, it probably was difficult. I mean, his servants took the time to dig it. He took the time to deal with this, to set up camp, and now all of a sudden somebody's coming in and being like, back off. So, I mean, it's not like he didn't put effort into whatever it was. But when he gave up both those things, where he said, you know what? Have it. That's when God gave him a blessing. Sorry, I have allergies. That's when God gave him the wide open space where he could settle down. The word promised land is used in the Bible. The word promised land, where God has promised the Israelites to settle. We each have our promised land. Isaac has his. God promised him a place and gave him that blessing. But if we don't give up hostility and the anger, then we won't get the blessing. We don't sit there and say, you know what? I'm not fighting over this. You want it so badly? Have it. Because I've got hope that you don't have. So here, have it. So can you do that? Can you openly and honestly give up the arguments, give up the hostility, and say, you know what? Have it. And I'm not downplaying anyone's trauma or emotions. I mean, I have a laundry list of all of it. But those are chains. Those are chains that keep us bound in anger and in pain. And Jesus wants to get rid of those chains. So, can you work with God? Work with the Holy Spirit. Say, okay, I want to let go of these chains, as scary as it is. I want to let go of it. I want to give up the argument. I want to give up the hostility. Because what's coming next is the blessing from God that's going to change all of it. But I've got to be willing to let go and maybe not win the argument, or maybe let the person that you're hostile to seem like they got away with it. Because God is a sovereign God. You know that He gave you mercy. So hope today you work with God, or at least start to work with God on these things. And I hope you see Jesus in all you do. And I hope you see Jesus, and I hope you see God's promise all around you. And I hope you have a wonderful day.